Hello everyone, welcome to another video on the Data Perspective channel. In our previous video, we learned on how to filter for rows and columns of data using conditional statements. So in our today's video, we'll be looking at how to update data in our rows and columns. So as usual, I'll be using this sample data set to understand the concept before going to our survey data to carry out further examples. So without wasting time, let's dive right into it. So the first thing we'll be looking at is how to modify the column names in our data frame. To do that, let's first look at the various columns we have in our data frame. So to do that, I have to call on the dot columns attribute on our data frame. So if I go ahead and run this, we'll be getting a list of the names of all the columns in our data frame. So if you look at this, we have name, age, city, salary, and occupations, and these are all the names in this data frame. So let's say we want our name column to be called first name instead. So how do we go about that? So to do that, we can use the rename method and pass in a dictionary of the columns we want to change. So to change name to first name, I will say df.rename. Now we're going to go ahead and pass in a dictionary containing the names of the column I want to change. So in this situation, our dictionary is going to contain name, so our key will be name, while our value will be the new name we are changing to, and in this case first name. If we go ahead and run this, we would see now that our column name has been updated to first name. So if we want to keep the changes, we would have to add the in-place argument and set it to true. So without that in-place argument equals to true, if I go ahead and print our data frame, you'll find out that our changes was not implemented. So we still have our name column as name instead of first name. So to implement our changes, we would have to say in-place equals true. So if I go ahead and run this now, and now rerun this our data frame here, you will now find out that our changes have been implemented. Next, what if we want to change all our column names in our data frame? How do we go about that? To handle this, I'll first be using the dot columns attribute once more to get all our columns in our data frame. So I'll call on the df dot columns, and with this we'll be getting a list returning all the columns names in our data frame. So let's say for example we want to change all these names in this data frame. We can do that by using an assignment and passing a list that contains all the new names we want for each of the columns. I can say assignment. So now let's pass in our list and the new names which we want for our list. We are changing our first name to names, and we're also changing age to ages, city as cities, salary as salaries, and occupation as occupations. So I just use the plural form for their changes. So if I go ahead and run this now, and let's look at our data frame once more, we will see that all the names of our columns have been changed. So you can see we have names, ages, cities, salaries, and occupations instead of the previous names we had earlier on. We can also make use of list comparison to make changes that are specific to each columns. So for example, I can decide to make all our column names in upper cases. So in order to do this, I will say df and call our columns attribute once more so that we can get all the columns names in our data frame, and we can pass in an assignment and our list comprehension now. So I will say s.upper for x in df.columns. So if I go ahead and run this, and now let me go ahead and print out our data frame, you can now see that all the names in our data frame are now converted to uppercasing. Now let's look at how to update the data in our rows. So first we'll be looking at how to update a single value in a row. In our previous class we have learned how to access single values in rows of data by using the .loc and the .iloc method. So we'll be using same process for updating our values in rows. For example, let's say we want to change the name of Bob to John. So how do I go about to do that? So the first thing I have to do is to access the value of Bob. So I can say df dot, then I'll call the iloc method and pass in our square bracket. So we have Bob in our row 1 index value, and let's pass in our column name, which is names. So if we go ahead and run this, we'll be accessing the Bob value, right? Now we want to change this value to John. So now all we have to do is to assign this to our new value, John. Now if we go ahead and run this, now let's go ahead and check our data frame to see if our changes have been effected. If I scroll down, you will see now that we have John as our name instead of Bob. In situations where you want to change multiple values, you can assign a list containing the new values. So for instance, let's say we want to change our name, occupation and salary value. So I'll first of all access those values which I want to change. So in this situation, let me go ahead and copy this. Now instead of names only, we also want to change our salaries and our occupation, right? So let me add this to our list. If I go ahead and I'll go ahead and delete this first, and let's run this and ensure that we've okay, so these have to be occupations. So let me go ahead and run this once more to see that we've accessed those values we want to change. So now all we have to do now is to assign this to our new list containing the values we want to change it to. So let's say we want our name to be Bob once more. And let's say our salaries, we want it to be at 50,000. And let's say our occupation, we want that to be nurse. So if I go ahead and run this now, and now let's check our data frame once more and see if those changes have been implemented. So now you see we have our name as Bob. We've changed that. We've changed John once more to Bob. We've changed our salary value to 50,000, and we also changed our occupation to nurse. So with this, you'll see that our value has been updated. Next, we'll be looking at how to update multiple rows of data, and we can do this using different methods. So for our first example, let us change all values in the name column so that they are all in upper casing. To do this, let's first access that name column. So we can do this by saying df, pass in your square bracket and pass names. So if we go ahead and run this, you'll see now that we are accessing this names column. Now we want to change all the values in this column to upper casing. So all I have to do is call the str, which is the string method, and call the .upper method on this. So if I go ahead and run this, you'll see now we have all our names in upper casing. So now to implement this change on your data set, you would have to assign this to the name columns. So okay, so all we have to do now is to call our data frame, access the name column which you need. Okay, and assign this to these values here. So let me go ahead and copy this and paste it here. So if we go ahead and run this now, and let's go ahead now and print out our data frame once more. So if we run this, you'll see that those changes have been effected. We now have all our names in uppercasing. So now let's go over to our survey data set to look at some examples. Okay, I'll just scroll a bit up so that we can get a good look at our data sets. So this is our data set, and we have our main branch, employment, remote work. We have a whole lot of columns. If you look at this, we have the head level, and if you look at the responses in this head level, we have master's degree, we have the bachelor's degree, and so forth. So this column tells us about the education level of each of our responses. So let's say, for example, we want to change this column name to education level instead of this head level. To do that, we have to use the .rename method to carry out that change. So let me scroll down, and let's change the head level column to education level. All we have to do is to say data and call the .rename method. Now write in your columns and pass in a dictionary containing the keys and pair value of those column name you want to change. In our case, we have head level, and our value, that's the name we want to change it to, is education level. So now if I go ahead and run this, you would see here that we have education level instead of the head level we have previously. Also remember that with this, if I go down and say I want to look at my data set once more, let me see, I want to see the first 5 rows of my data set. Okay, so if I go ahead and run this, we're still going to be getting head level because we have not used the in place argument to keep our changes in place, right? So all I have to do is to add in the in place argument and say in place equals true. And with this, if I run this once more, and I can now go ahead and run this to see the first 5 rows, now you can see that that change has been implemented. In our next class, we'll be learning how to update multiple values in rows of data. We'll be learning how to use the apply map, the map, and the replace method to update multiple values in our rows of data. So this brings us to the end of this video. I hope you were able to understand how to update values in columns and rows of data. If you have any questions, contribution, or comment, please kindly drop it in the comment section. I'll try my best to go through each and every one of them and answer it. Endeavor to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also ensure to share this video to your friends, family, and loved ones that you know are interested in Python programming for data analysis or data science. Remember to also give this video a thumbs up if you found it educative or useful to you. See you in my next video, and bye for now.